So the small intestine averages about 6 meters in length. So if you think about, for some of you who have big feet, um, and a meter is roughly about 3 to 4 of your feet, think of that 6 times um, that 3 or 4 feet length, foot lengths. That's a long, long intestine. 6 meters is a long ways to go, while the large intestine is 1.5 meters, so it's a meter and a half. Still pretty long to think that you have all of these tubes inside your body just within your abdomen. So what we're looking at here is um, the small intestine is longer, but it's got a smaller diameter. The large intestine is got a larger diameter, so it has nothing to do with the length of the intestines. There are 3 parts of the small intestine. The first one is called the duodenum or the duodenum, depending on how you pronounce it. Um, those are the major 2 ones that I've seen, duodenum and duodenum. Um, I don't think that you can butcher it much further than like duodenum. I don't know. Anyway, so the duodenum or duodenum is that first 25 centimeters of the small intestine. So if you try to figure out with your fingers right now, find out 1 centimeter and then try to get 25 of those, that's just under the length of a ruler. The duodenum or duodenum is the principal site of digestion of nutrients. So it's breaking things down through mechanical or chemical digestion, as we've talked about previously. It receives bile from the liver and takes part in the emulsification of fat. So it breaks down fats through receiving bile from the liver. Again, something I made a quick mistake on is the last lesson or the first lesson. The liver lies on the right side of your body, and if you take your right hand and you put it on the upper right portion of your abdomen, just below your rib cage, that's where your liver lies, and it's a fairly big organ. So the liver delivers bile to the duodenum or duodenum, which is the first 25 centimeters of the small intestine. The duodenum also receives pancreatic juice from the pancreas. So there's a duct that transfers um, pancreatic juice from the pancreas. And there's a lot of enzymes there for digestion of nutrients. Also, it's used as a buffering liquid to um, de-acidify the stomach contents. Because if you remember in the stomach from last video lesson, the stomach has hydrochloric acid in it. And the intestines don't really like that high acidity or low pH um, in their environment. So it needs something to neutralize that. So it has pancreatic juice. That's where sodium bicarbonate comes into play. So sodium bicarbonate helps neutralize the pH of the stomach contents, or the chyme, if you remember that from last lesson. And yeah, I'll let you finish writing those down. Okay, so the next slide has the image that's on your notes here, and I'm going to try to annotate these using what's available here. Let's use blue. So last class, we talked about how this is the stomach right here. Whoa, that is not following my pen. Okay, there's the stomach, and at the end of the stomach, right here, is something called the pyloric sphincter that we talked about last class. And the pyloric sphincter is, again, a ring of muscle that opens and closes to let things through. The actual um, duodenum is in green here, and it goes like that. Ooh, that wasn't right. Okay. My computer's starting to die, so everything's lagging. Anyway, um, So it goes right here. So that's the duodenum. It might actually come a little farther down here, which is fine, and down here as well. Okay, I'm going to clear that because that's horrible. So the duodenum, it's shown better on the right side here. So this is the first 25 centimeters. That's a duodenum. It's C-shaped, which kind of helps things out. There's a letter C, a big letter C that shapes the duodenum. All right, going to clear all those out there. We talked about the fundus. This is the stomach. Right here is the pyloric sphincter, and right here is the gastroesophageal sphincter that we talked about in previous classes. All right, so we'll continue on. So the second and third parts of the small intestine are called the jejunum and the ileum. That's I-L-E-U-M. And I just love the way they sound, jejunum and ileum. If you say jejunum over and over quickly enough, you kind of sound like you're beatboxing, just an FYI. So the jejunum and ileum are different than the duodenum, because the duodenum is the principal site of digestion, still breaking things down, but the jejunum and ileum deal with absorption of nutrients. So that's where the food particles have been broken down in the stomach, broken down just even further in the duodenum so that they can be absorbed in the jejunum and the ileum. And they're just paired together for the purposes of this course. The lining of the jejunum and ileum have villi, which is a plural word. Singular is a villus. And those are like finger-like projections that help increase surface area for absorption of nutrients. The villi contain lymph lacteals that absorb specifically fatty acids and glycerol, which are the smaller monomer or broken down components of lipids, or lipids are smaller versions of fats. The villi also have blood capillaries that absorb sugars. So that's the simplest structures of carbohydrate breakdown, as well as amino acids, which are the simplest or monomers of proteins. The anatomy of the small intestine looks like this. So you have the sort of folds here, but those folds are not the villi. The villi are these tiny things here. Again, a singular one is a villus, and the lymph lacteals are green because they deal with the lymphatic system that we'll cover next. As well, there's the blood capillaries, which are blue and red for exchanging nutrients for wastes. The large intestine is, again, like we said, it's a larger diameter, but it's shorter in length. It's only 1.5 meters. The first part that we're going to talk about is called the cecum, which is sort of, they call the blind end of the large intestine. So that's the opening. And right near the opening of the large intestine is something called the appendix, which you've probably heard about. Anybody who's had appendicitis and possibly had their appendix removed, that's a projection of the cecum that looks kind of like your pinky or even smaller, sort of a worm-like projection. Doctors think it may have a role in fighting infections. And that stops at, if it ruptures, may cause something called peritonitis. So peritonitis is when your appendix gets enlarged to the point where it actually bursts. So if you have a really painful, something causing you a source of great pain in your bottom right quadrant of your abdomen, so on your right side, sort of near your waist, just a little higher, it just gets unbearable. And then at one point it just feels like, oh, so much better. That's actually a really bad part, because that's when your appendix is burst. And then all the contents of your large intestine, which is anything that's left over that doesn't get absorbed into your body, basically a precursor to poop, just starts to spread all over your abdomen. And that's not good, because that can become toxic. That's called peritonitis. So if you do feel pain around your appendix area, get it checked out by a doctor. The second part of the large intestine is the colon, which has 4 specific areas. There's the ascending colon, which goes upwards on the right side of your abdomen. The transverse, which goes from right to left at the upper part of your abdomen. the descending colon, which goes down the left side of your abdomen, and lastly, the sigmoid colon, which is an S-shaped part that terminates at your rectum. There's going to be a diagram for that as well that I can show you. The main role of the colon is to absorb water, in case you need to retain water in your body, as well as reabsorbing salts that you might have originally lost in your urine. And lastly, like I mentioned, the colon, all four areas of the colon, the sigmoid colon is the last, terminates at the rectum. So getting back to the small intestine, and then there's that blind end there. Here's the cecum, which is just the very beginning portion of your large intestine. And then there's your appendix, which here it's called the vermiform appendix. Vermiform takes its root word in worm, verm being worm, kind of like vermicelli noodles, which are like small worms. A little trivia for you. All right, so things are about to get crappy here, pun intended, where we're going to talk about the defecation reflex. So defecation reflex is how your body essentially gets rid of waste. So in more layman's terms, it poops. So essentially, feces is forced into your rectum by peristalsis. And again, that's that wave-like contraction by a tube forcing feces or poop into your rectum. At some point, the rectum walls will stretch out, and that'll initiate a reflex. It's sort of similar to like when your urinary bladder gets really filled up, and then it starts sending messages up to your brain that you need to go to the bathroom. Same thing happens for the defecation reflex. Your rectal muscles eventually, when it's time to go, will contract, so they'll push, and your anal sphincters, there's that word again, we talked about two previous sphincters, your anal sphincters will relax. So you have two pairs of anal sphincters, internal and external anal sphincters, that will squeeze up tight to prevent you from defecating your pants or pooping your pants. When you do need to go to the bathroom, your rectal muscles will push and your anal sphincters will relax, and that'll result in defecation. The composition of feces, as listed in your textbook, is 75% water. And remember, a lot of that's been retained in your body. Anything that, if your body doesn't need to retain it, gets deposited in your feces. Anything that's indigestible and your body can't absorb, and that can be anything that's just excess nutrients that it doesn't need, or maybe you've just eaten something, or if you've gone to a fancy restaurant where they put gold leaf on the food and it's super fancy, but that doesn't get absorbed by your body, so it just ends up in your feces. There could also be bacteria in your feces. And lastly, the color of your feces is from the breakdown of bilirubin and oxidized iron. So it's like a rusty red or a brown that gives it its color. Lastly, we have the defecation reflex here. You have some blanks on your diagram there that I'm going to have you pause the video here, but I am going to explain things. So if you do need to go back and pause it, you can. So essentially what happens here, this is a side view. I know it's a very weird looking image, but here's part of your spinal cord. And then here's your rectum, which is just the last portion of your body before the anus. Here are your two sets of sphincters, your internal anal sphincters and your external. Essentially, feces fills up the rectum to the point where stretch receptors on the walls of the rectum send messages up to your spinal cord, and then a reflex action sends a message back to the rectum walls to not push unless they need to. So again, that's right here, and stretch receptors initiate impulses to the spinal cord. And then lastly, motor impulses cause contraction of those rectal muscles and relaxation of these anal sphincters to allow for evacuation of feces from your body.